In the dark prison, there is a white soft tent. The prison door opened and came in slowly. Lan Ling raised his head suddenly, the familiar footsteps, he still came. She thought that she would never see him again in this life. She slowly came out of the soft tent, walking very hard, the long chains on her feet swayed, the barbs on the chains were sharp, pierced through her ankles, and the blood on the head congealed the hard bar, stabbed at her leg with every step, seeped more blood. "What are you doing?" Lan Ling asked softly, her long eyelashes trembling. "Come and see you," he said in a deep voice, reaching for her. She was a step away from him, pulled by him, the hook on the ankle pierced into the flesh and pulled out large pieces of flesh. She bit her lip, sweating profusely. He tore off her white robe suddenly, revealing a touch of pink undershirt. Ling Feng looked down at her, her belly bulged slightly. Lan Ling's hoarse voice cut through the night, her pale face and her clenched lips. There was blood on his feet. Ling Feng scrutinized Lan Ling up and down, stared at her slightly bulging belly, and said coldly, "He will not come to save you, the news that I have conceived you with his evil seed has long been spread. Go out and announce your punishment tomorrow." "He didn't come, are you disappointed?" "Who did the emperor say? Why did he come to save me?" Lan Ling asked lightly. Ling Feng squeezed her chin, and made a crisp, broken voice. Lan Ling chuckled, tears condensed in her eyes. She instinctively covered her stomach and pushed him with both hands. He got angry, tightened the chain in his hand, and watched her bend down in pain. The corner of his mouth smile became colder, he picked her up and threw her on the bed. She was tearing and kicking with all her might, blood dripping from her feet. He held her hands, hung the anklet at the end of the bed, bullied himself up, looked at her big tears. "Your body is mine. I cannot love you, but you can't love others." How did you get it?" His tone was light, the corners of his mouth grinned, but his eyes were like ice. She is dirty, but he wants her madly. Lan Ling felt for a moment that he still had love for him, because he hated her, and when he hated her, there was love. "Ling Feng, I just fell in love with you, I never betrayed you, this child it's yours, why don't you believe it? I don't want children of unknown origin, and I don't lack children. But Ling Chen has admitted it, you have nothing to argue with." Lan Ling closed his eyes. Ling Chen once said that he liked her, that's all. "Ling Feng, have you ever loved me? Even a little?" Ling Feng was silent. "How long until dawn? Gouging out the heart, isn't it?" As soon as the blade fell, the love in the world was completely cut off. The barbs of the anklet were torn, Lan Ling's face turned pale, but he only smiled. When he couldn't take it any longer, he screamed out to ease the pain. "Does it hurt too?" Ling Feng's fingers slowly rolled around. Blood dripped down, Lan Ling bit her lip. "What would he do if he knew that you were so fond of me?" Blood poured out of Lan Ling's body, and her belly was pounding like a cone. He glanced at the bright red beach under her, his eyes were light, without a trace of waves. He figured in a hurry, put his hands on her shoulders, full of hatred, and pulled out. He paused, looked back at her, finally speechless, and hurried out of the cell. The one he loves is always the queen, her half-sister Sapphire. Lan Ling saw that he was not fully clothed, and didn't want to appear in front of everyone tomorrow, so he tore up the tent, tore it into clothes, and put it on his body. She is only 19 years old now, and she is still a flowery age. The heart has been riddled with holes. Lan Ling is leaning against the corner, her eyes are ethereal. "If you start over, will you still love so desperately?" Lan Ling is the daughter of the Grand Marshal's concubine, not even a concubine. She is the child of her father Lan Jingtian and a woman outside, and her mother is the daughter of the Tsingyi Hall's head. After giving birth to her out of wedlock, she died soon after, and her grandfather in motion was 13 years old. When she was 13 years old, she knew that her father was the famous Grand Marshal Lan Jingtian of Daxing Kingdom. In the same year, she was transferred to the marshal's house. The 13-year-old girl met the 19-year-old third prince Ling Feng for the first time. A woman who grew up in the mountains since she was a child fell in love at first sight with this orchid-like man. In the winter of that year, Ling Feng was trapped in the floating city by the fourth prince, Ling Chen. At that time, Lan Ling loved him very much. Although Ling Chen always showed her love to her, she finally chose Ling Feng and rejected Ling, who was tall and indulged in joy all day. Dust. Lan Ling returned to Motion to ask for her grandfather, who sent 50,000 troops to support Ling Feng. Grandpa's condition is that Ling Feng will marry Lan Ling as the concubine, and when he gains power, the queen will be given to Lan Ling. Ling Feng agreed. Grandpa led his uncle and Lan Ling to relieve the siege of the floating city and drove Ling Chen out of Jiangbei. The emperor died soon. Ling Feng became the emperor and changed the country's name to Daxing. Ling Feng became the emperor and did not fulfill the position she promised her queen. The queen's position was vacant for half a year, and finally it was given to Lan Ling's sister Lan Yu. Sapphire is his love. He is the emperor and has the ability to give the best to his beloved. Lan Ling was named Lan Gaifei. Now, this imperial concubine is going to be sentenced to gouge out the heart. The criminal law is very mysterious. Tiger. And the crime is really unforgivable fornication with foreign enemies. In fact, only the Queen Lanyu and the Emperor's confidants knew about the crime that really caused the Emperor to put Lan Ling to death. The next day, it snowed. Lan Ling stood in the prison cart, barefoot, with dark red feet. He was draped in a white tent, his face was pale, his lips were blue and purple, he was trembling, and his eyes were still clear. She looked up, and the snow fell on her face, instantly turning into water. Later, it is also her sister, Lan Yu. They looked down at her like ants. She remembered that she led the 50,000 army of her grandfather's direct line into the floating city, holding a homemade bomb in her hand, and waving the Qiushui sword to his side. He laughed and hugged it. She said, "Linger, it's really you, only you can save me." She remembered that he became the emperor, and soon took her into the palace. At that time he slept in her Ling Yun palace almost every night. Ling Yun palace, everything is the best. Later Sapphire told her that it was the emperor who did it on purpose and had nothing to do with love. In return for her 50,000 troops, she became the target of the harem. She once thought of marrying an unparalleled hero and walking through this life hand in hand with him. Now, people are dying and losing their hearts. There was a slight disturbance in front, and a black horse galloped. Immediately, he came to the front of the prison car and slashed the door lock of the prison car with a knife. The surrounding guards rushed up and quickly formed an encirclement. Lan Ling looked up and saw that it was the fourth prince Ling Chen. Ling Chen and Ling Feng have similar eyebrows, but his lines are thick and tough, which is different from Ling Feng's femininity. Ling Chen was unrestrained and acted frivolously. Once her horse was injured and fell down, Ling Chen even saved her. He laughed and talked, but he could never tell the truth. She didn't like Ling Chen. At that time, she only had Ling Feng in her eyes. Ling Chen was surrounded by him. Lan Ling looked at him in surprise. "His Royal Highnessan, why are you here?" Ling Feng looked gloomy and looked down at them. "You are really affectionate, and you really came. You are brave enough to enter the field alone. Do you think you are the prince? I dare not do anything to you?" "Ling Chen, it's my world now. Anyway, if you bring back all your people and surrender, I will let this woman go." Ling Chen grinned, the left corner of his mouth raised slightly. "Ling Feng, I just can't bear it. It's a pity this little beauty, I like her, but it has nothing to do with her. As for the child in her belly, and it has nothing to do with me. I have no shortage of women in Ling Chen, and I don't want to take the blame. However, I really want to have something with her." Ling Feng snorted coldly and helped Lan Yu down from the city wall. Lan Yu's body is weak and delicate, holding Ling Feng's arm. "She is my sister after all, I will send her off." The bodyguards surrounded Ling Chen. no one gave orders, and no one dared to hurt Ling Chen. After all, he was the prince. Ling Feng slowly walked down the stairs and looked at Ling Chen. You are here, it's good. It doesn't matter whose child is in her stomach, I just want you to come. So, even if it's your own, you won't keep it? Ling Chen asked him with a smile. Yes, I won't stay. I know you like her, that's enough. I didn't expect you to come. Since you're here, don't think about going back. Archer, get ready, let's go. Ling Feng instructed lightly. Lan Ling listened, tears spread. It turned out that her innocence was meaningless. His Royal Highnessin, if you really help me, just go. Lan Ling was sad, she really didn't want to implicate him. At the beginning, she and her grandfather helped her father lead the army to drive him out of Jiangbei. Ling Chen leaped, stuffed his black cloak into the prison cart, and wrapped it around Lan Ling. If you start over, I won't let you fall in love with this beast. Ling Chen whispered into Lan Ling's ear, his voice was low and painful, unlike the usual Ling Chen who was not in shape. Lan Ling's heart froze for a moment, and when he looked up, Ling Chen had already jumped to the side, waving his sword and entangled with the guards. Ling Feng waved his hand, and a rain of arrows surrounded Ling Chen. Lan Ling was taken out of the prison cart and tied to a large pillar. The executioner held a short knife, and it was chilling. Just wait until noon and gouge out the heart. Lan Yu came slowly, she approached her, and whispered in a voice that others could not hear, Lan Ling, you look very ugly today. Very dirty. After a while you will be if you show your breasts, your heart will be gone. Aren't you very powerful? Aren't you going to help brother Ling Feng make bombs? Don't you have a magic weapon? Didn't you help him take the world? So what? What he loves is still me, he just uses you. Snowflakes fell on Lan Ling's body, and her feet were numb with pain. Stepping on the snow with bare feet, the dull, numb pain made her feet tense, and her ankles hurt even more, as if they were about to break. Although her heart was dead, the fear of death still made her nervous. She closed her eyes. Yes, she was afraid too. Sapphire, I admit that I am defeated, I regard you as my relative, and regard him as my beloved. Over the years, I have suppressed my own nature and conformed to you, I lost myself. My grandfather will not let you go when you frame me. Lan Ling gritted his teeth. Lan Yu chuckled, when death is imminent, you are still obsessed. Just like your stupid mother, your mother can't fight against my mother, and you can't fight against me. Tsing Yi Tang only listens to your grandfather. Do you really think that the emperor will keep your grandfather's life? What do you mean? Lan Ling was stunned. The emperor wants Tsing Yi Tang, so Tsing Yi Tang must listen to the emperor. A few days ago, the emperor asked your grandfather to commit crimes and make him destroy the Philadelphia rebels, and he pardoned you. Your grandfather really killed the rebels. Just yesterday, the emperor celebrated his victory for him. Your grandfather, your two uncles, and his confidants, all died of poisoning. Sapphire spoke softly, her face as gentle as water. Blue spirit is too dull to breathe. Snowflakes fell coldly on her skin. The Empress, the hour has come. The executioner beside her reminded Lan Yu. Lan Yu's hand gently stroked Lan Ling's hair. Let's go, maybe you can meet them on Huangchuan Road. Ling Feng. Is what she said true? My grandfather and uncles have been killed by you. Lan Ling didn't believe it. Yes. Ling Feng glanced at Lan Yu lightly. Why? They've been helping you. Lan Ling cried blood and trembled. What I want is an obedient Tsing Yi Tang. Ling Feng looked disgusted and stopped looking at her. Ling Feng, I only fell in love with you in this life, and it caused my family to suffer this disaster. You are so ungrateful. I curse you, you will never be happy. She heard the exclamations of the people around her, looked at Ling Feng's indifferent and complicated eyes, and saw that Ling Chen was desperately rushing towards her, but she couldn't get rid of the arrow rain in the sky and the surrounding in the guard's sword forest. He was covered in blood, and a long sword slashed towards his face. At this point, he could no longer walk, but he kept looking at her, and there was no smile on his face. Lan Ling couldn't breathe. Blue Jade withdrew, bowing her head and sobbing in Ling Feng's arms. You are too kind, don't be sad, she deserves it. Ling Feng comforted Lan Yu in a low voice. Lan Ling's big and beautiful eyes stared blankly ahead, with another exclamation from people. She felt a chill in her chest. The executioner tore off the clothes on her chest, revealing Snow White. He looked up, she took a sip of wine and sprayed it on her chest, a palpitating coolness. Execution. In the world of ice and snow, there was a loud shout. At this moment, I finally know that the original heartbreak feels like this. Out of thin air, an unintentional person came. Lan Ling's feet no longer hurt, and the solace of the feet are soft. She lowered her head and stepped on a sea of flowers, which turned out to be soul-inducing flowers. Isn't the soul flower red? Why is it all white here? At the end of the sea of flowers, it really is the Nehi Bridge. In the Xiaoxian on the bridge, sits a beautiful woman with a white cloud dress and a soul-inducing flower beside her ear. We met again, but now you have become an unintentional person. She looked at Lan Ling with pity in her eyes. May I ask who the girl is? Lan Ling asked. Meng Po. Isn't Madame Meng an old woman? Lan Ling was surprised that Madame Meng was so beautiful. In the world, is it possible to collect characteristics from people's ears, eyes, nose, and mouth, and transfer them into the heart, to see people and things with heart? You only use your ears, you think I'm an old man mother-in-law? That's why, girl, you become an unintentional person. What the girl taught was that Lan Ling was unwilling. Meng Po raised a white jade bowl from the front of her eyes. Drink it, those things that can't be put down, those love and hate, those sadness, those unwilling will all be forgotten. Forget love water. But I can't drink it. So many people died for me. I can't forget. Can the girl help me? Lan Ling stepped back. If you want to go back and take revenge, you can't. Everything has a reason. She refused. No, I won't take revenge, I will go back to protect the person I love. Lan Ling thought of her grandfather, uncle, Lixia, Xiao Chun, and Ling Chen, who didn't know if she was still alive. Meng Po looked up at her and sighed. You know that when you protect your lover, you will be bruised and bruised, are you willing? Yes. It's an exchange. The girl doesn't want to forget this life, that's okay. But you and that person have gone through 2 lives, but they haven't recognized each other. Fate only has 3 lives, the last one, I will help you not to reincarnate, but you have to recognize each other and love each other. Otherwise, you will return to this bridge of Nehi, make love water for me, and never reincarnate. Can the girl agree? I promise. I've lived with that person for 2 lifetimes. The girl said it was Ling Feng. Lan Ling was surprised. The secret can't be revealed, you have to find your lover yourself. But you agreed so quickly? Do you know how to make forgetful water? Lan Ling doesn't know, but it's better than being gouged out. Forgetting love water, need a drop of raw tears, 2 old tears, 3 bitter tears, 4 cups of regret tears, 5 inches of lovesick tears, 6 cups of sick tears, 7 feet of separation tears. This is the 8th medicine, is your sad tears. You have to offer these sad tears for me every day, but are you willing? Blue Spirit is willing. Okay, leave a bunch of your hair and drink this cup of rebirth soup, you will forget me, everything here, and the agreement between us, but you will remember your past life. Go. Lan Ling opened her eyes again. What catches the eye is a round chubby face. Miss, what are you dreaming about? You cry like that, and there are still tears. It's amazing that you can still cry when you are dreaming. Lixia? You are Lixia? Why are you here? Lan Ling hugged Lixia tightly. She knew that Lixia was already dead. When she was framed by Lan Yu, she wanted to protect. She was killed by the cane. Miss, I've been here since I was a child? What's wrong with you? Confused. Lan Ling let go of her and looked around. The familiarity made her heart tremble. This is her Motion's home, her boudoir when she was a girl. How many times, in the middle of the night, she came back here and lived a free life in this big mountain. Why, I came back here after I died. Is it because I miss it so much? Miss, don't scare people, you can't die so easily, you just fell off the tree and fell, won't you break your brain? Li Xia said, reaching out and trying Lan Ling's forehead. The door opened suddenly, and a little green girl ran in. Miss woke up? Great, what day is it today? It's all a good thing. Xiao Chun, are you here too? The scar on your face is gone. Lan Ling reached out and carried Xiao Chun over, touched her face, and looked at her. Last life. Her right cheek was slashed by Lan Qin, and her face was disfigured. Miss, my skin has always been very good, how can there be any scars? Lan Ling closed her eyes. Is everything a dream? This dream is too long, and it is so real, it still hurts in my chest. Lan Ling pinched her thigh, it really hurts. Outside the window, the motion in late autumn, red-orange, yellow and green, is a beautiful scene. Am I not dead? Or, am I alive again? Miss, there is another great thing, your father is here. You have always wanted to know who your father is. Does Miss know who your father is? Lan Ling was stunned. What day is it today? On the 10th day of the 8th lunar month. What's wrong with you, Miss? Xiao Chun was a little disappointed when she saw that her joy had not infected Lan Ling. The 10th day of the 8th month. Lan Ling remembered that 6 years ago, on the 10th day of the 8th month, her father Lan Jingtian took her away from motion, and her life of despair began. What country is it now? Da Chong, what's wrong with you, miss? Did you fall and forget everything? My grandfather, uncle is still alive. Of course. Miss, don't scare us. Xiao Chun frowned, and looked at Lan Ling with a worried look on her face. Lan Ling suddenly sat up and hugged Xiao Chun and Lixia tightly in her arms. It's good you're all alive. Traces of the vicissitudes of life. Only the eyes are as deep as the ocean. This is a beautiful girl, like a lily with morning dew. This is not the resentful woman who has experienced betrayal and injury, and was cruelly gouged out. I'm really still alive. Lan Ling had mixed feelings. Maybe my resentment is too deep, God let me live again? Lan Ling understood that he had returned to the time of a young girl. Miss, the hall master asks you to go to the Parkway Hall immediately. A girl hurried in to report. Miss, the hall master definitely wants you to see your biological father. Xiao Chun came up. Miss biological father is. I see. Lan Ling said lightly. I haven't said who it is. Xiao Chun widened her eyes. Lan Ling understood that her grandfather wanted her to meet her biological father, Lan Jingtian, the Grand Marshal of the Daxing country. She must not go with him this time. Xiao Chun, come with me, I'll find my master. Lixia, if the hall master comes and asks, you don't know anything. Lan Ling quickly packed up and put on the huge ring called Phantom on the index finger of her left hand. Miss, why are we leaving? Didn't you always want to see your father? He is the Marshal of Daxingguo. Really, very majestic. Xiao Chun couldn't understand, she always wanted to see her father. Miss, why is it so unusual today? Don't ask, in short, we will all die if we see him. So, at least today, we can't meet. Yao Lin, Lan Ling's master, is a hermit, and the locals call him a medical fairy, living in Qinglong Mountain behind motion. Usually travel around the world, rarely stay in the mountains. Lan Ling thinks that maybe the master will believe her rebirth. She has many things to ask her master. Lan Ling took Li Xia and sneaked out of motion through the back door. As soon as she entered the entrance of Qinglong Mountain, Lan Ling suddenly saw a man in black huddled in the grass behind the rock in front of her. She immediately pulled Jiao Chun to squat down. The man in black was leaning behind the rock, holding a sword in his left hand and wearing a silver eagle face mask. He was injured and had blood dripping from his right arm. There was also blood oozing from the abdomen. Lan Ling saw a shadowy figure in front of him, the man walking in the front, looking from a distance, with white face, thin eyes and long eyebrows, handsome and gloomy. At this time, he should be only King Ning. Is this fate? Can't hide? Do you want to see him today? In that life, she was also introduced to Ling Feng by her father today, and she fell in love with him at first sight with just one glance. For the rest of her life, she could not forget it with all her strength, so she went to a doomed situation. In this life, she never wants to have any intersection with them again. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer, Lan Ling looked at the man in black lying on the ground, who was Ling Feng chasing. Lan Ling picked up a stone and threw it to the left. Ling Feng stood still and quickly led people to the left. Lan Ling stepped forward and helped the man in black on the ground. He followed her obediently and hurried to the right. He had an arrow wound in the shoulder and a stab wound in the abdomen, none of which was critically injured. "Thank you, girl, for saving me." The man whispered his thanks. The dagger in Lan Ling's hand suddenly fell to the ground. This voice was so familiar. Lan Ling trembled slightly. She reached out and took off the man's mask, square face, long eyes, sword eyebrows, and a nose carved like a knife. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, and he was looking at her quietly. "He is the fourth prince, and Wang Ling Chen." She snapped the mask on him, pulled Jiao Chun and turned around and walked out. Walking to the door, she remembered her last life, the last moment of her life. Ling Chen came to save her. In fact, she didn't know why Ling Chen would risk her life because of her. They had not yet reached that kind of relationship. It's just that he wrapped her in a cloak to keep her a little dignity and a little warmth, and she was always grateful. Lan Ling came back again, quickly took out the medicine from his own package, sprinkled it on the wound, and tore off Ling Chen's underwear to wrap it up. "I'm going to draw an arrow for you, there is no anesthesia, you have to hold back." Lan Ling whispered. "Okay." He answered briefly, looking at her with interest. Lan Ling took out her small medical kit and used a green knife to cut 3 small incisions around the arrow. With a force, Ling Chen groaned and the arrow was pulled out. Lan Ling sprinkled medicine on the wound and bandaged it. "The girl is good at medicine," Ling Chen sincerely praised. Lan Ling was silent, she just wanted to leave him quickly. "Okay, go out from here, go down the path on the left, there will be a small stream. Go straight to the left along the stream, you will see a big phoenix tree, go through the tree, there is a way to the bottom of the mountain." Lan Ling dragged Jiao Chun out. "Wait a minute, girl, you saved my life today, may I ask your name and name, where do you live, I will come to thank you later." "No, I don't want to meet you." "Then, may Miss want to know who I am?" "I don't want to." Lan Ling hurried out of the cave without looking back. She and Xiao Chun entered the hillside of Qinglong Mountain from the small road, passed through a dense and secret forest, and suddenly opened up in front, and then passed through the plum blossom forest, which was his master's yard. Just out of the woods, I saw a few people standing in front of me. His grandfather Chen Yushui stood there with his hands behind his back, and beside him stood a black man in his 40s, who was his father Lan Jingtian. Behind Lan Jingtian, the stern man in blue clothes, with a long body and long eyes, is Ning Wang Ling Feng. "Linger." Grandpa saw Lan Ling. "You just woke up, why did you run out again?" Lan Ling stood there, staring at Ling Feng, dumbfounded. "Linger, this is your father. You asked your grandfather for a father all day long. Now he is here. Come and see your father." Chen Yushui took Lan Ling's hand and dragged him. Seeing Lan Ling staring at Ling Feng without blinking, she thought that this girl was crazy. Lan Ling returned to her senses and saluted Lan Jingtian. Linger sees her father. The voice was cold and distant, and she did not see her father's excitement at all. In the last life, her father did not care about her, it could even be said to be indifferent. When he went back to her, he needed the Tsing Yi Tang behind her. Later, he ignored so many things that happened to her. The only daughter in his heart was Lan Yu. Lan Jingtian looked Lan Ling up and down with complicated eyes. You look a lot like your mother. He paused, as if unwilling to bring up the past. Linger, this is King Ning, come and see His Royal Highness King Ning. Blue Spirit's heart is shaking. His heart was just gouged out by him. Yes, it was what just happened, vaguely as if his cold smile was still in front of him. What else are you doing? He asked unconsciously, his eyes sad, even bitter and resentful. Ling Feng's heart moved slightly. Linger. Meet King Ning. Grandpa saw Lan Ling lose his appearance. Lan Ling suddenly understood, bowed and saluted. Lan Ling pays respects to King Ning, his tone was even colder. She looked up at him, he was staring at her, his eyes exploring. Lan Ling stabilized his mind, how could he be so reckless? At this time, they should have just met. Who would believe that he would gouge out her heart and kill her 6 years later? Lan Ling turned around and walked to her grandfather. Grandpa, Linger doesn't want to leave you, besides, I have to finish the task that the master gave me. The master let her in 3 months 30 people were saved. Linger, you are already a big girl, you can't stay in the mountains all the time. After all, you are the daughter of the marshal. In the future, you will also marry a famous family and live in the mountains all the time. After all, it is not right. Grandpa stroked the top of her head and said fondly. Linger doesn't want to get married. Besides, Linger is used to living in the mountains, and the life of a famous family will not be happy. Grandpa, please. She looked up at her grandfather, her face tense. The ground is tight. Linger, haven't you been asking your grandfather for a father? What's wrong? Besides, you are the daughter of the marshal, your father, and need your help. Besides, if your mother is alive, I also hope you can go back to the Lan family. Grandpa sank his face. Lan Ling knew that she used to be full of curiosity and longing for her father, and whenever she was punished by her grandfather, she would shout for her father. And today Wang Ning and her father came to pick her up in person, and my grandfather could not refuse. She had already met Ling Feng and Ling Chen today, and some things could not be changed. Since she can't escape, let's face it. In this life, she wanted to avoid them and live her own life, but now it seems impossible to stay out of it. Linger, go down the mountain with your father today, I've prepared all the luggage for you. Okay. Lan Ling did not resist. The grandfather looked at her and felt that she was different today. She saw the father she had always wanted, but she was not happy. Her smile before was enough to break the sun. Now, Linger, his eyes were indescribably indifferent, stained with vicissitudes. She fell from the tree more than once, this time, did she break her brain? Back to the residence, Lan Ling really saw that the carriage was loaded with luggage. Lan Ling understood that his father was so anxious to let him go back to Lan's house because the prince was just assassinated last month. Ling Ling, the war between Feng and Ling Chen has become incandescent. Lan Ling is the closest granddaughter of the master of Tsing Yi Hall. He had a purpose in taking her back at this time. Lixia sees them, her face is red. Miss, I really didn't betray you, I told the hall master I don't know anything. Well. Pack up, we will leave motion to Yunchinj today. Before leaving, Lan Ling saw her grandfather and 2 uncles alone. She knelt down with a rare seriousness on her face. Grandpa, Linger can go to the marshal's mansion, but Linger has a few things, please agree to it. Linger, what's wrong with you? Chen Yushui supported Lan Ling. Lan Ling can't afford it, Grandpa agrees, then Linger can get up. You child, tell me, what's the matter? Chen Yushui sighed. First, don't tell your father how many people there are in Xingyi Tang. If he asks, tell him as few as possible, and don't tell him where the headquarters of Xingyi Tang is. Second, under no circumstances can you agree to lend soldiers to my father. Third, if my father talks about my marriage, don't marry Linger to the royal family. Chen Yushui helped Lan Ling up. Linger, what happened? Your father mentioned your marriage, and the matter of King Yiitang helping King Ning. Don't worry, I said I want Xing Yitang to go out and help King Ning. You must be the concubine of King Ning. Grandpa. Don't mention this again, I won't marry King Ning. Why? In the current situation in the DPRK, King Ning is the first choice for the crown prince, and your father also supports King Ning. Linger will tell you the reason later. Grandpa, you must promise Linger, otherwise, we will all die. Lan Ling's eyes were filled with tears. Only they are her relatives. She deeply understands that this time down the mountain, her bumpy fate is about to begin. But Linger, many things, your father can't stay out of it, above the court, his power, it's impossible not to stand in line. Your father asked me for help, and I can't help it, and about you, in fact, your father has more right than me to make decisions for you. Letting you go back to the marshal's mansion with him is also to find a good family for you. Chen Yushui stared at Lan Ling's eyes. Her eyes are as deep as the bottom of the sea, filled with fireworks, not the bright-eyed little girl from before. Grandpa must ask Linger before making a decision. If you don't agree to Linger, Linger will not go to Yunchanj even if she dies. Linger, what happened? Chen Yushui was puzzled. The day before yesterday, she had been making a fuss about going down the mountain to find her father's girl, but now she seems to be a different person. Grandpa, we don't know much about my father and his life. I just don't want anything to happen to Xing Yitang. Lan Ling said lightly, seeing Grandpa's worries. Okay, Grandpa promises you, the things you said, Grandpa must first discuss with Linger before making a decision. Chen Yushui agreed to Lan Ling. On the evening of August 11, Lan Ling entered the gate of Yunchanj. Xiao Chun and Li Xiao lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked out. Yeah, miss, Yunchanj is worthy of being an imperial capital, so prosperous. Lan Ling smiled wryly. She would rather never set foot in the city. The carriage entered the bustling coastal road, and Lan Ling's carriage suddenly ran like crazy. The two girls screamed in fright. Lan Ling held the window lattice of the sedan chair tightly in her hands. The horse did not stop. Her father and uncle chased after her desperately. Lan Ling even saw King Ning also chasing behind. The horse neighed and ran into a narrow road, and a tall masked man in black jumped into the carriage from the side with a swoosh, reached out and stunned Lan Ling, hugged her, and disappeared. When Lan Ling's eldest uncle Chen Wen stopped Crazy Horse and stopped the carriage, there were only two pale-faced little girls in the carriage. Lan Jingtian was furious, who was so daring to his daughter under his nose. And King Ning is still with him. He was furious and immediately ordered a search across the city. Lan Ling opened her eyes, a warm fragrance, a light yellow warm tent, her hands and feet were tied to the bed. Ying Ying Yanyan's extravagant voice came from outside. Where is this? Lan Ling looked around. The door suddenly opened, and a man who was drunk came in. There was no lamp in the room, and the man approached her, exhaling a hot breath. Master spent a lot of money to break the property today, I don't know if it is worth 5,000 taels of silver or not. The man said and climbed into the bed. Lan Ling was shocked, listening to this person's voice, it was clearly in Wang Ling Chen. In the previous life, Ling Chen had been indulging in the joyous scene all day, and his reputation was not good. He put one arm on the bed and leaned over to look at her, with a pair of slender phoenix eyes, a little tight, but his breathing became more and more rapid. He stretched out her belt and pulled her skirt up, pushing up, a big palm stroked her leg. Lan Ling was shocked. Bold, I'm the daughter of the marshal, let me go quickly, or my father will smash you to pieces. The man laughed. Why don't you say you are a princess? I'm just spending money for fun, whose daughter? He didn't let go, and his hands were free on Lan Ling. Where is this? How much money did you spend? I will make my father double it for you. Lan Ling was anxious. Here, Chunminlu, the biggest brothel in Yunchanj. Don't worry, I will take good care of you. His lips fell and he kissed her strongly on her forehead and cheek, neck. Lan Ling was furious. My dignified son, he went to a brothel. He froze for a moment, pinched her chin, turned her face, and said in a lazy and cold voice, how do you know I'm a prince? Lan Ling immediately shut up. Do you know me? Your injuries are not healed yet, do you still have the strength to visit a brothel? Lan Ling couldn't help sneering at him. In the past life, Ling Chen would tease her every time he saw her, so she always annoyed him. Ha ha ha, he laughed, isn't there a saying that peony flowers are also romantic, do you want to try? His voice was frivolous and full of lust. Lan Ling suddenly understood that he should have recognized himself. She closed her mouth immediately and turned her face to the side. He got off her and turned to light a candle. I was shopping for fun here, and I saw that they tied a man in, saying that there was an unbudded chick, and it was auctioned at a high price. I will cover you. Don't worry, you are safe here. You covered me? Shouldn't you send me back to the marshal's mansion immediately? Lan Ling glared at him. He looked very young, tall, and burly, and he was imposing. You don't want to know who kidnapped you here? He looked at her with a gloomy smile. Who is it? Don't you know? Lan Ling remembered that in her last life, she didn't experience this when she returned to the marshal's mansion. Seeing Lan Ling looking at him with a bewildered face, he gently squeezed Lan Ling's face with his hand. This Hu Fei was once your father, Marshal Lan Jingtian's rival in love, it's also your stepmother's current relationship with the marshal's wife, Shen Shi. It seems that someone doesn't want you to return to the marshal's mansion. It was originally made by Shen Jun. Lan Ling knew that Shen Jun didn't like her all the time, because Lan Yu liked Ling Feng, and she would find a way to get rid of anyone who threatened Lan Yu. This time, King Ning and Lan Jingtian went to motion to bring her back, but Shen Jun didn't want to give her a chance to get close to King Ning. You untie me first. Lan Ling's hands and feet were still tied. Then you have to promise me that you won't be able to escape after unbinding. You live here for 3 days first. Why stay 3 days? I want to say, I don't want you to go back to the marshal's mansion, do you believe it? The current blue spirit certainly believes it. In her previous life, when she returned to the marshal's mansion, she simply thought that her father felt that she was growing up and should return to the marshal's mansion, so that she could find a good family for her. Now she understands that what they need is Grandpa Tsing Yi Tang. I believe. Lan Ling replied casually. What do you believe? What do you little girl know? Ling Chen smiled. I took care of you, kept you innocent, and repaid your kindness for saving me in Qinglong Mountain. I didn't know you were Lan Jingtian's daughter at the time. Let you stay for 3 days, yes, for my own sake. To be honest, if you hadn't rescued me, I would really like you to live here forever. Don't worry, after 3 days, the people from the marshal's mansion will naturally pick you up. After Ling Chen finished speaking, he leaned over and kissed Lan Ling's forehead, with my seal, you are mine. Bastard, rascal. Lan Ling was so anxious and angry that she couldn't move, so she could only curse. You dare to scold the prince, it's a death sentence. You should still tie it up. Ling Chen grinned wickedly and lay down beside her. Do you know why your father is in such a hurry to take you back to the marshal's mansion? Then tell me first, why are you in Qinglong Mountain? Are you injured? Lan Ling answered with a question. I know that the third child went to motion to see the master of King Ai Hall, and I also wanted to see the power of King Ai Hall. The third child found out and chased after Qinglong Mountain. It's your turn to answer my question. Ling Chen leaned over and looked at her. My father picked me up, of course he missed me, and I'm an adult, so I can't stay in the mountains all the time, I'm his daughter after all. Lan Ling answered half-truths. The corner of Ling Chen's mouth twitched. You are a cunning girl, does your grandfather really have 100,000 troops? Lan Ling was silent. Also, although we met on Qinglong Mountain, how do you know that I am the prince? Have you met me before? Ling Chen looked at Lan Ling and ignored her, looked at her, and kissed her cheek again. Lan Ling was scolded again. Lan Ling turned around and ignored him. Ling Chen was silent for a long time. Lan Ling turned to look at him, he was actually asleep. He didn't seem to be on guard against her. The heart is really big. Lan Ling thought to himself. Ling Chen slept until midnight before leaving. Lan Ling was locked in Chunminlu's room, and there was a special person to serve her. She had delicious food and drink every day, but she was not released. Everyone in Chunminlu knows that Lan Ling was paid for by nobles. I heard that on the first night of her breakup, she yelled and scolded until midnight. On the third day, Lan Ling pricked up her ears as soon as she opened her eyes, waiting for someone to rescue her. The man with a hangover touched Lan Ling's room, his face was red and his eyes were blurred. Lan Ling was bound by his hands and feet, so he could only call for help and curse. Chunminlu's mother came in to stop her, and was kicked out by the man. The man closed the door, his face full of violence, and stretched out his hand to tear Lan Ling's clothes. Lan Ling shouted, Ling Chen! Here! It turned out that he had been watching out the window, this pervert. The door was kicked open, and Ling Chen disappeared in a flash. A handsome man rushed in with 4 people. The man slashed the man who fell on Lan Ling. Miss San, I'm Lu Chong from the Marshal's mansion, don't be afraid, it's all right now, the Marshal asked me to take you home. Don't worry, this brothel has been closed. All insiders have been resolved. Lan Ling knew Lu Chong, he had done a lot for her in the last life, and the eyes he looked at her were always full of pity. Lu Chong untied Lan Ling's rope and helped her up. He found that Lan Ling didn't seem to be afraid. She just pursed her mouth tightly, her face was tensed, she sorted her clothes, and followed behind him without saying a word. At the corner, she saw Ling Chen, he smiled and watched her leave. Master, her reputation is ruined, will King Ning marry her? Tian Ming, the guard behind him, asked Ling Chen. It's hard to say, King Ning is also a person who will do anything to achieve his goals. We are very similar. At the gate of the Marshal's mansion, Lan Ling got out of the carriage, looked at the 3 characters Marshal's mansion flashing on the door, and saw Xiao Chun and Lixia running to her crying, and at the door she the anxious faces of her 2 uncles, she sighed in her heart that she was back. In this life, she will definitely protect them, no longer allow others to bully them and give her life in vain. Miss Xiao Chun and Lixia came around with tears in their eyes. They surrounded Lan Ling and entered the compound. Before entering the hall, I heard a woman's voice, she has been in a brothel for 3 days, where is she still innocent? I heard that she was taken care of, her reputation is gone, who would dare to marry her in the future? What a sin! The speaker was a graceful and luxurious lady, she sat on the right side of the table with a full moon and a smile on her face. That was the Marshal's wife, Lan Yu's mother, Shen Jun. The next one is her second concubine Zhou Yuan. Behind Shen Shi, the 28-year-old girl who was wearing a purple dress, phoenix eyes and thin eyebrows, was the first lady of Yunchensh, Lan Yu. Lan Ling crossed the crowd and stared at Lan Yu, her cold words still in her ears. Her hands were clenched and her body trembled slightly. Such a beautiful face, yet so cruel. Last life, Lan Yu gave her medicine, sent someone to strip her naked, and hugged Ling Chen who was drunk, let Ling Feng think she was cheating, and let her explain it again, gave her a catastrophe. Since this life is still entangled with her, Lan Ling swears that this life will never repeat the same mistakes. Standing behind the blue jade is the second sister Lan Qin. She is the dog leg of the blue jade, because she was born by the ant. She is always afraid that others will look down upon her, clinging to the blue jade tightly, and doing things even more arrogant. Last life, Lan Qin married the fourth prince Ling Chen and became her side concubine. Ling Chen was defeated and she died in childbirth. The nanny next to her is leading the youngest brother, Lan Min, born by the third concubine. In my memory, the third concubine was soft-natured and sick all the year round. Although she had a son, she was never favored. Lan Qin was born by the second concubine, and Lan Min was born by the third concubine. After all, the father has not many children. There are also few aunts. Lan Ling heard Shen's words, pretended not to hear. She walked slowly to her father and bowed and saluted. The people in front of her, except her father, should all be waiting to see her laugh, but unfortunately, the current Lan Ling is no longer the little girl in the mountains who just arrived at the marshal's mansion 6 years ago. At that time, she really cared about what others thought of her, tried her best to please them, learned etiquette from them, but she couldn't get in with them, and even lost herself in the end. Lan Jingtian looked at her with complicated eyes. He gestured to Lan Ling slightly, "Linger, I have seen your mother." Lan Ling stepped forward and gave a big gift with a smile. Lan Ling has seen her mother. Shen Qi was wearing a dark red luo skirt with a blessing and longevity pattern, with jewels on her head, and a graceful face. She stepped forward and helped Lan Ling up. "Son, it's hard for you, just come back." As she spoke, she burst into tears. Lan Ling sneered in her heart, "My suffering is not yours." Hypocritically. "What you give me, I will give it back to you sooner or later." She looked at Shen and said warmly, "Mother, don't worry, Lan Ling didn't suffer much, they just shut me up and didn't do anything to me." Lan Ling raised his hand gently and gave Shen Qi wiped away her tears. "The 2 girls you brought are young and unfamiliar with this place. I have sent you 2 stable girls, Bai Tao and Kai Yutang. From now on, the 2 of you will serve the 3 miss." Shen Qi pointed to the 2 girls and said to Lan Ling, "This Bai Tao is a girl from home. She is 16 this year. She can be the big girl in your yard." "Thank you, mother." Lan Ling smiled happily and nodded to the 2 girls. These 2 girls, of course, she remembers, they are both from Shenzhen. In the previous life, the first time Xiao Chun went from house to house was that they were the ghosts. My father still let her live in Jinyuan. It was a small garden near the west side. Entering the bedroom door of Jinyuan, Li Xia saw the soft silk quilt on the bed and sat on it. "It's really comfortable." Lan Ling sneered when she saw Bai Tao pouting. Lan Ling smiled slightly, "Trouble you too, go and ask the housekeeper for some realgar, the 2 of them have just arrived and don't recognize the way." Lan Ling said to Bai Tao and Kai Yutang. Bai Tao and Kai Yutang agreed to go out. "Lixia, Xiao Chun, you 2 check the surroundings, especially the quilt, lift it up and take a look. It's been a long time since no one has lived here." Lan Ling said lightly. "Check what?" Li Xia said while lifting the quilt. "Ah, scorpion!" Li Xia exclaimed. Xiao Chun hurriedly stepped forward to check, and sure enough, there were 3 big scorpions under the quilt. "There are scorpions in this place." Xiao Chun was surprised. Life is not guaranteed. Lan Ling's eyes became cold and severe. Xiao Chun and Li Xia had never seen Lan Ling like this. "Understood." Xiao Chun and Lixia replied timidly. In her last life, on the first night she entered Jinyuan, she was stung by scorpions for 3 large bags, and she was also taken by Shen Jun to the banquet in the palace. Only then did I know that it was Lan Qin's credit. Lixia shouted exaggeratedly. Lan Ling sent Bai Tao to ask for medicine, and everyone soon knew that Lixia was stung by a scorpion. In the evening, the Shen family sent someone to deliver new skirts and jewelry. The next day was the Mid-Autumn Festival, and the Empress invited them to the palace for a small gathering. This is something that people look forward to. Every year at this time, the palace will invite the family members of the ministers in the court to the palace to participate in the family banquet. At this time, the princes and princesses will participate, not so much the Mid-Autumn Festival. The party is more like a blind date. The emperor and queen will take this opportunity to see the manners of the ministers and children, and the prince and princess will also take the opportunity to choose the person they like. However, that night, the second lady Lan Qin was stung by a scorpion. She was stung on her chin, 3 big bags, and her whole face was swollen. Lan Qin just fell asleep for a while after the meal. Unexpectedly, when she woke up, her chin was sore and itchy, and she had 3 big bags. She glanced at the mirror and burst into tears. The Mid-Autumn Festival feast she has been looking forward to for a long time, is it going to waste? Who is she showing the beautiful luo skirt she has prepared for a long time? Can't she see the 4th prince that she never forgets? Lan Ling heard Li Xia come back and said that Lan Qin was also stung by a scorpion, and smiled slightly. Of course she knew that she was stung by a scorpion. In the afternoon of the second day, Lan Ling wore the light blue luo skirt sent by Mrs. Shen, with only a simple plum blossom glass hairpin on her head, and a silver moon-shaped emerald jade on the back of her head. Hairpin. This silver hairpin was given to her by her master, and it also has a name, Yue Hun. She knew that the prince just passed away last month, and the empress would never like to see her gorgeous and colorful figure. Moreover, she doesn't want to be noticed, and in this life, she doesn't want to be entangled with any of them. Gathered in the hall, Lan Ling saw Lan Yu. She was wearing a light purple painted hibiscus waist-length dress, with a hairpin of the same color on her head, smiling slightly, her skin white as snow, weak and boneless, charming. Behind her, there was a veiled Lan Qin. She frowned, with tears in her eyes. "Mother, let Qiner follow, I promise not to say a word." "The royal banquet, you are wearing a veil, what a formality." Lan Ling silently followed behind Sapphire. She didn't want to stick to the slightest bit of Sapphire's limelight. Standing in front of the gate of the palace again, Lan Ling trembled slightly. The northeast corner behind this palace is the palace where she lived, Ling Yun Palace. At the far west end of this palace is where her heart was gouged out. Here, I will see Ling Feng again. He was named Prince Ning just last month, while Ling Chen was named Prince An. If she could, she would never come back here forever. Lan Ling closed his eyes, calmed down, and slowly walked into the palace compound of Yunchenj. Lan Ling saw the emperor again. In her last life, she only met the emperor twice before marriage. At that time, Shen Jun didn't take her with him every time he entered the palace. The 2 times she met was when the emperor asked to see her by name. She met the Empress Balin again. He was the mother of the former crown prince. Ling Feng in the previous life became the emperor and named her the Empress Dowager Yide. His own mother Zhou Qinmo was the Empress Dowager Shunda, and later she couldn't bear the oppression of the Queen Mother of Shunda, and she died half a year after moving to the Taimiao. The death was very strange. She also met her mother-in-law, Ling Feng's mother, the current concubine Zhou. She and the queen sat next to the emperor. Blue Ling gritted his teeth. "In my impression, concubine Zhou liked Lanyu very much, and always treated her harshly as a mountain woman." Ling Chen's mother, concubine Lin, was sitting at the bottom. Her status was very low, and it was only because she had this son that she was qualified to participate in this kind of family banquet. Her complexion was gentle and light, and she was taciturn, but Lan Ling felt that she had no charm at the moment. Lan Ling took a sneak peek. Ning Wang Ling Feng and An Wang Ling Chen were sitting on their seats, followed by the 5th to 10th princes in order. The crown prince is the eldest son, who has passed away, and the second prince died at an early age. The current Ling Feng is also the best candidate for the crown prince in every aspect. She felt a beam of light scorching her, and looked sideways. It was Ling Chen. With a smile on his face, he glanced through the crowd and shot at her. Lan Ling's face turned to one side, not focusing on him. He always has a purpose for her, and it is dangerous. Lan Ling does not want to approach him. Marshal Lan, I heard that you brought back the third daughter you raised outside? I really want to see what Chen Yan's daughter looks like now. The emperor actually called his mother's boudoir name directly, and was very affectionate. Lan Ling saw that Shen Jun's face changed. Could it be that the emperor also knew his mother? Father Lan Jingtian came forward to give salute. Today Weiken brought a little girl, Linger. Lan Ling got up, she took a deep breath, with a smile on her face, she walked up slowly and gave the emperor a big gift. Shen Jun was surprised to see Lan Ling Luo saluting generously. She didn't send someone to teach Lan Ling the etiquette in the palace. She wanted to see a joke today, but she didn't expect Lan Ling to understand all these etiquette. This girl is so scheming, she will be in trouble for Tim Muir's confidence in the future. Thinking of this, her kind and gentle eyes revealed a cold frost that could not be hidden. Xiang, like her mother. After all, she's 13, right? Just 13. Lan Jingtian replied. Is there a marriage? The emperor stared at Lan Ling. Lan Ling was heartbroken. She was really afraid that the emperor would arbitrarily point her to marriage. Reporting to the emperor, the little girl has just returned to her father, and she has not yet done her filial piety. The little girl wants to spend a few more years with her father, not to mention, the little girl still has a eldest sister on her body, and the second sister is waiting in her boudoir. Lan Ling Jiao answered the emperor's words in front of her father, and she concluded that the emperor would not blame her. Lan Jingtian glanced at her, but said nothing. Lan Yu's face turned pale, and she quickly glanced at Ling Feng. Ling Feng looked light, he looked up and down Lan Ling. He always felt that Lan Ling was hostile to him, indescribably cold and alienated, and he was a little annoyed. Of the women he knew, who did not admire him and had a crush on him, Lan Ling was the first woman to be so indifferent to him. This child is quite filial, the queen said lightly. She was pale and lonely. After the prince died, she had no other children. Qi Empress, this girl has lived in the mountains since she was a child and doesn't know the rules. She was frightened again a few days ago and bumped into the emperor. Please don't blame the empress and empress. Shen Jun couldn't hold back annoyed, she saw that the emperor was very fond of Lan Ling, could it be because of that Chen Yan? What are you scared of? I heard that they were kidnapped for 3 days. Ling Feng's mother, Zhou Qinmo, took over. She was very afraid that the emperor would point Lan Ling to his son. How could Ling Feng want such a wild girl, and she has lost her innocence. Her ideal daughter-in-law is only Lan Yu. The emperor gave Lan Jingtian a thoughtful look. Lan Jingtian glared at Shen Jun, and Shen Jun swallowed his words. Lan Ling listened and sneered slightly. Shen Jun wished everyone knew that she was taken into a brothel. But she didn't care at all. It's better that way so that no one will strike her attention. She suddenly understood why Ling Chen wanted her to stay in the brothel for 3 days before the Lan family could find her. He said it was for himself, maybe he was afraid that she would marry Ling Feng. Anyway, you'll be safe. Is Lan Yu also here? The queen changed her words lightly. Sapphire hurriedly saluted. She stood next to Lan Ling, the 2 daughters of the Lan family. Lan Yu was delicate and charming, Lan Ling was pure and refined, and the real national beauty and heavenly fragrance. Everyone who saw it straightened their eyes. The banquet started. Lan Ling sat there silently. Lan Yu played the piano to add to the fun of the banquet, and made a splash. It was convenient for Lan Ling to go to the outside during the banquet, and a little palace maid took the initiative to lead the way. When she came back, Lan Ling suddenly felt dizzy, she screamed badly, and slowly lost consciousness against the wall. When Lan Ling woke up, she found that there were white flowers in front of her. A naked man was leaning over to look at him. Lan Ling was about to scream when someone covered his mouth. He looked at her with a playful expression. What a coincidence, it seems that the two of us are destined. When Lan Ling touched himself, he only had a close-fitting apron. You are so shameless. She raised her knees and slammed into the man's crotch, but was held down by him, unable to move. Shh. He pointed to the outside and whispered, don't blame me. I'm a victim too. I woke up like this. Lan Ling heard a low voice from outside, how's it going? Don't worry, you have already succeeded, and you are all unconscious inside. Okay, I want to see, if she looks like this, brother Ling Feng will marry her. Lan Ling heard that the voice was Sapphire. Ling Chen quickly hid to the door. Lan Ling closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. The door was gently opened with a small crack. Lan Yu's head poked in. Ling Chen stretched out his hand and directly carried Lan Yu in, covering his mouth. Just as a little girl behind Lan Yu was about to escape, Lan Ling pressed the phantom on his hand. A small needle was hit, and the little girl fainted. Ling Chen glanced at her, a little surprised. Lan Ling lived in motion until she was 13 years old. Her grandfather and uncle taught her to practice martial arts in their spare time. The phantom ring on her hand and the silver hairpin moon soul on her head were given to her by her master Yao Lin. They are both accessories and weapons. So if she has a heart, most people can't hurt her. In the last world, she was just too stupid to give all of herself to someone who didn't love her. That was when she was imprisoned in the dungeon. Ling Feng put a barbed anklet on her to prevent her from escaping. Lan Ling got up and put on his clothes. Lan used tricks, she knew very well, in the past life, she had many such wicked tricks. Lan Ling remembered that she used this trick to frame her and Ling Chen in her previous life, but it only happened after she married Ling Feng. To this kind of thing. Moreover, Ling Chen would also be hit. After all, she was the daughter of the Grand Marshal, not a wild woman in the hook outside. Ling Chen had knocked Lan Yu unconscious. His face was red and his eyes were red. He took out a small porcelain bottle from the little girl's clothes, took the medicine and poured it into Lan Yu's mouth. What's that? The aphrodisiac she gave me just now. Ling Chen gritted his teeth. Lan Ling's face changed, desperately trying to escape, but before taking a few steps, he was picked up by the belt and carried on his shoulders. Ling Chen snorted, put her down and grabbed her chin. Little girl, her claws are very sharp. He grabbed her hand, and Lan Ling heard the bones shift crisply. Sound. The tears of her pain were coming down, but at this time, she couldn't show weakness, she knew that Ling Chen was in the aphrodisiac. Crack. She slapped Ling Chen hard. Ling Chen froze for a moment, and let go. Lan Ling suddenly realized what she had done, and turned to run. Between the lightning and flint, the neck was instantly pinched by the man's big palm. Lan Ling held his arm tightly, gradually becoming weak. Her body was smashed to the ground. Lan Ling got up. If you want to kill or slash it, it's time for you, and you still care about it. She reached out and put a meditation medicine in his mouth, which can relieve aphrodisiac a little. Effect. Ling Chen was stunned again. Give me something to eat. An antidote, an aphrodisiac. Lan Ling stretched out his head and glanced out the window. Behind the house was a small lake. She stabbed the silver hairpin into the girl's chest with her hands, making sure that she was dead. Quick, throw her into the lake. She grabbed the ground. Ling Chen didn't move, he still couldn't believe that he was slapped by a girl, and he didn't want to kill her. He glared at her. Do you know what the crime of beating the prince is? It's better than this lewd charge. Hurry up and help. Lan Ling stomped. You are a very cruel woman, why did you want to kill her? Wouldn't it be better to keep her as a witness? Ling Chen frowned slightly. The mouth of a person, who knows what it will say, since you caught Lan Yu and gave her an aphrodisiac, then be honest, Don't make any changes. Lan Ling's voice was cold and severe. He looked up at Lan Ling. Her handsome face was ruthless, different from her age. Ling Chen reached out and picked up the girl, went out quickly, and threw her in the lake. Lan Ling stopped looking at him, straightened his clothes, and walked out quickly. When she was about to get to the banquet hall, she met Ling Feng. He seemed to drink too much, his face was reddish, his eyes were bright, and when he saw Lan Ling, he stepped forward to stop Lan Ling front. Why are you always avoiding me? The prince is mighty, the little girl is just timid and has never seen the world. You look very good today. Ling Feng suddenly approached her, her phoenix eyes closed slightly, she smelled it, and seemed to enjoy it. Your Highness is looking for the eldest sister, right? Lan Ling stared at her. In the last life, this man made her love to the bottom of her bones, lost her love, and killed her relatives. Seeing him so close now, she still has heart palpitations. Did you see your sister? Lan Ling just wanted to say that she didn't see it, but suddenly her mind moved and said slowly, I seem to have seen her go over there when I first came out. Lan Ling pointed to the small house. Direction. Oh, the palace is huge, be careful to get lost. He looked at her. Thank you, Lord. Lan Ling saluted and left quickly. Ling Feng was a little annoyed, she avoided him like a plague god. Lan Ling returned to the seat. Everyone was still drinking. This year, because of the death of the prince, there was no singing and dancing during the banquet, except that Lan Yu played the piano for everyone during the opening of the banquet. Rewards from ministers. During the banquet, the emperor and the queen were chatting with the ministers, which was a real family banquet. Shen Jun frowned slightly when he saw Lan Ling. Lan Ling glanced at her, and knew that Shen Jun knew about her framed up today. Her identity is insignificant, but Ling Chen is the prince, and if he can frame the prince in the palace, then there must be important people involved. Lan Ling remembered Ling Feng's expression just now, he should not know. Lan Ling glanced at Ling Feng's mother Zhou Gaifei, she was looking at her thoughtfully. Lan Ling immediately got up and saluted, smiling brightly. The inner responder in the palace must be her. Lan Ling suddenly understood that Ling Chen's situation should be very difficult, his mother and concubine were not favored, and he was also missed by Zhou Gaifei, the emperor's celebrity. She had a bad impression of Ling Chen in her previous life. This prince was suave, attracted bees and butterflies, and did not do proper work, but he was Ling Feng's opponent for the throne, and Ling Feng was even close to losing in his hands. There must be some means. Remembering that when her heart was gouged out in her previous life, he tried desperately to save her. Thinking about it now, in the last life, that romantic prince seemed to have been taking good care of her. At that time, she only thought he was Meng Lang, because every time he saw her, he always liked to tease her. However, being able to go to the robbery field is definitely not something that someone who has nothing to do with it. Lan Ling thinks about it now and still feels puzzled. Ling Chen came back, she saw him sitting there, his face was still red, she thought he was drinking too much. Concubine Zhou's complexion sank. A few girls who brought wine bottles came in. The girl in green gave the bottle to the girl in red next to Ling Chen's mother. Lan Ling saw that the girl in red stretched out her hand to pick up the jug, but the girl in green stretched out her feet. No one found out, except Lan Ling. With an exclamation, Lan Ling saw Ling Chen's mother's girl staggering and was about to fall. She was very close to Lan Ling. Lan Ling reached out and supported her, throwing the jug in the air. She was also caught. The girl turned pale with fright and immediately knelt on the ground. The rash girl disobeyed in front of the palace, and is not guilty. Concubine Zhou's face became even more gloomy. The concubine, the little girl, almost fell down just now. It's the little girl's fault that she touched this girl. Lan Ling said. She is not afraid of concubine Zhou, she knows that her son does not want her to die now. She is not afraid of offending concubine Zhou, she even hopes that the more she hates her, the better. She didn't want to give Ling Feng any chance. Forget it, don't spoil the happy day. The queen said lightly. Concubine Lin glanced at Lan Ling with a kind face and nodded slightly in thanks. Lan Ling smiled at her. I don't know why, but I feel that concubine Lin is very close. In the last life, she didn't have much contact with concubine Lin. At that time, her eyes were only on how to make concubine Zhou happy, and other people were not in her vision. He squinted at Lan Ling. Is she helping his mother? She is clearly the daughter of Lan Jingtian, and Lan Jingtian is the third child of Ling Feng. Lan Ling is waiting for a good show. She saw Shen Jun whispering in her girl's ear. She probably asked her to find Lan Yu. There was a loud noise outside, and the little girl hurried in and whispered in Shen Jun's ear. Lan Jingtian frowned and asked in a low voice, "What's going on?" Shen Jun was shocked, got up and hurried out. Blue Sedum followed. Lan Ling glanced at Ling Chen, who was drinking with General Zhang next to him. At this time, a whispered beside the emperor, and the emperor's face changed slightly. Beasts! Bring them to the inner room. You too. He pointed to concubine Zhou. Lan Ling secretly laughed in her heart, wondering how the emperor would be angry. After a cup of tea, the servants came in and called Lan Ling and Ling Chen into the servants. Looking for me? What's wrong with Sapphire? Lan Ling glanced at Ling Chen and shook his head. Entering the door of the inner room, Lan Yu saw concubine Zhou, father, Shen Shi, King Ning, and Lan Yu all kneeling there. The emperor had a dark face, and there were broken cup fragments on the ground. Lan Ling and Ling Chen came in and knelt down. The emperor looked at them coldly. Lan Ling, Lan Yu said you like Qing'an, and asked her for help to deliberately prescribe medicine to hook Qing'an. As a result, Qing'an misunderstood and gave her and King Ning medicine again. What? The emperor's voice held back. Ah! Lan Ling was stunned. Lan Yu is really clever. Your Majesty, Lan Ling didn't know what happened. You're still making a quibble. Qing'an, King Ning said you spent 3 days with Lan Ling in Chunmanlu, but is that true? The emperor turned to Ling Chen and asked slowly. Ling Chen raised his head, reporting to the emperor, but there is something wrong. The third young lady was taken captive to Yangziang, and it happened that the son was also there. The son did not know that she was the daughter of the marshal. You bastard! Isn't Lan Ling's innocence ruined in your hands? Do you really like Lan Ling? Return to father and emperor, son, and minister like it. Okay, how about giving you the blue spirit to be a princess for your father? Ling Chen was slightly taken aback. I only want to give the position of a prince and a princess to my beloved. You're talking about Guan Yu, the daughter of the Northwest Marquis? Well, I'll give Guan Yu your concubine and Lan Ling your side concubine. I have lost the crown prince. Today's family banquet, I don't want to lose interest. Since Lan Yu and King Ning are in love, I will give Lan Yu the concubine of King Ning. Go away. The emperor threw the last teacup to the ground. This result was unexpected. The emperor did not investigate the matter of the drug. The emperor's mind, no one can guess. Lan Yu was ecstatic. She didn't expect that the emperor would marry her and King Ning. Ningguang Ling Feng's eyes were gloomy. He glanced at his mother, regretting that he didn't explain his thoughts to her clearly. He wants to marry Lan Ling, not for Lan Ling. When he came out, Ling Chen looked at Lan Ling with an ambiguous expression. He leaned into Lan Ling's ear and said softly, if I had known that you liked this king should have followed you directly. Why bother trying to figure out King Ning and Lan Yu to make the royal father angry? I said it wasn't me. Lan Ling gave him an annoyed look. Fu Gonggong, the chief servant, announced the decree on the same day. Lan Yu was given to King Ning, as the main concubine, and ordered to get married within 10 days. Lan Ling was given to An Wang, as the side concubine, and ordered to get married within 1 month. At the same time, Guan Yu, the daughter of the Northwest Marquis, was given to King An as the main concubine and married on the same day as the side concubine. The ministers were in an uproar. King An has been neglected for a long time. Unexpectedly, the emperor suddenly gave the right concubine and the side concubine. One is the daughter of the Northwest Ho and the other is the concubine of the Grand Marshal. Everyone speculated about the emperor's intentions. The emperor's thoughts, Queen Balin understands. Since the prince was assassinated, the emperor has changed a lot. The emperor's gift of marriage this time suppressed King Ning in disguise and raised King An. Lan Ling never imagined that, after entering the palace, she was given marriage to Ling Chen. In the last world, that man who was unruly and had countless women. But in the last life, when she was tortured to gouge out her heart, why did this man risk his life to save her? She can't change the fate of marrying into the royal family. On the 8th day of the winter month in the 24th year of Da Chang, Lan Ling married into Prince An's mansion. Lan Ling only brought her girls Lixia and Xiao Chun. Lan Ling had instructed the girl before she got married that she was a side concubine and should not fight for anything. The most important thing is that Guan Yu is Ling Chen's sweetheart. No one can compare this point. The life of the deep house compound, she has not lived. The grief in it, she knows better than anyone else. In this life, she only hopes that she will never fall in love with this man who does not have her in her heart. If you don't love it, it won't hurt. The Nwangfu has never been so lively today, with colorful lanterns everywhere and firecrackers shaking the sky. The ministers all know that King An's current status is not the same as before. The emperor gave 30% of King Ning's military power to King An. The situation in the DPRK has also gradually changed. The emperor, prince, and ministers have arrived. Lan Ling only heard the deafening noise around her. She didn't sleep well yesterday and was still dizzy. Lan Ling was covered with a hijab, and after the ceremony, she was sent to the bridal chamber. The surroundings were quiet. Lan Ling knew that the excitement of the sky was not for her. It was for Zhen Fei Guan Yu. She is a side concubine, just the concubine of the Grand Marshal. In the eyes of outsiders, it seems that she married King An by unclean means. Lan Ling lifted her hijab to take a peek at it. 2 bridesmaids were standing there, with a little girl in pomegranate red standing in front of the red candle on each side. Alas, Mrs. Ling, you can't lift your hijab by yourself, you have to wait for the prince to lift it. Xi Po said terrified. Where are the 2 girls I brought? Lan Ling asked. The housekeeper arranged it, I don't know where to go. What is the third lady's order? A little girl said crisply. Lan Ling wanted to say she was hungry. I was really hungry. I ate a little in the morning, but I didn't eat lunch. Lan Ling's mouth was full of sugar and couldn't swallow it, so she could only swallow it when she had a drink. There were bursts of laughter outside, and the little girl hurriedly leaned over to the window to look. You two, go and see the fun, there are not so many people here. Lan Ling said to the girls. The little girl thought Lan Ling was to blame, and immediately stood up straight. Lan Ling couldn't help it, so she swallowed the sugar in her mouth and picked up the dessert on the table to eat. Mrs. Ling can't do it, I can't eat until the prince lifts his hijab and drinks the wine. Lan Ling grabbed a handful of snacks and sat back on the bed, covered her head and started eating. You don't stand still, just sit down, the girls can go and see the excitement. This prince finally married his sweetheart, he forgot me long ago, don't wait for him, I'm starving. Hai Po looked at her dumbfounded. There was a sound of the door slamming. Lan Ling thought that the little girl had gone out. Come on, come back and tell me about the fun. She reached for the drumstick on the table and was held down. It was Nwang Ling Chen. He drank and blushed. A purple gown. You, the Lord is here. Lan Ling blushed, and reluctantly lost the drumstick in his hand. Sit down. The girl handed over the handkerchief, and Lan Ling wiped her hands. Marry me so casually? Do you think this is a joke? His voice was low. Ling Chen picked the hijab with the scale rod. The grandmother handed over the wine. He is very close to her, and the smell of green sandalwood and wine on his body is very good. The door opened suddenly, and a room of people came in instantly. Lan Ling knew Ling Chen's friend Hans He Tao, the 5th Prince Ling Yu, and the 6th Prince Ling Bai. Behind him were his personal bodyguards, Gu Fan and Tian Ming, and a tall, thin man with a scar on the left eyebrow that Lan Ling did not know. Sister-in-law Ling, are you waiting for my 4th brother to wait? A charming voice. Lan Ling saw that it was the 7th Princess Ling Shuang who squeezed in. Ling Shuang and Ling Chen were very close. She is the same age as Lan Ling. Princess, are you here too? Lan Ling asked smoothly. You know me? I just came back from my grandmother's house in Yangshan County, but I've never seen you. She was surprised, and Ling Chen was stunned. Oh, the girls said that the princess is back. Lan Ling covered up. I'm starving, I haven't eaten for a day. Lan Ling was a little embarrassed, and no matter how much, he sat at the table and started to eat. The crowd laughed. You're not making a bridal chamber over there, what are you doing here? Lan Ling looked up and asked when everyone was watching her eat. What did Linger say? Isn't this a bridal chamber? Ling Chen glared at her. That's right, the princess and sister-in-law are too shy, and my 4th brother protects and takes pity. This is not allowed, that is not allowed, it is not lively, everyone is not enjoying themselves, and they all want to come here. Lan Ling smiled bitterly in her heart, yes, there is no one to protect me, no one to pity me. I'm here, you can just say what you want, you go back to accompany your sweetheart early. Lan Ling said in a low voice in Ling Chen's ear. Ling Chen's face froze, he sneered, turned to ask Madame Xi, what other rituals are there? Madame Ling likes quietness. Ling Chen got up, let's go to the princess. Your sister-in-law doesn't like to make bridal chambers. Ling Chen said coldly. He was angry. Being so stingy, I'm all for his sake, Lan Ling thought. Who knows where my 2 girls are? Why haven't we seen each other? Lan Ling asked. Said. Lan Ling was a little worried. Lixia and Xiao Chun grew up in the mountains, and they were not constrained by themselves. It didn't take a few days to arrive at the marshal's mansion. She taught them some rules, but it was far from enough. The important thing is that they have a straightforward temperament, and they won't play tricks at all. In the last life, the 2 girls died a long time ago. At this moment, a girl hurried to report, My lord, the princess girl and Mrs. Ling's girl got into a fight. Just now, the princess went to mediate, and she was in a hurry. Before the girl finished speaking, Ling Chen had disappeared. Everyone followed behind. Lan Ling dropped the chopsticks in her hand and ran out. She was very flustered, she walked too fast, her foot twisted, and the pain was piercing, so she had to hold on to the wall and desperately went to Qunrun, Xiao Chun, Lixia, don't have any trouble. In the backyard, the newlywed princess sat on a chair, clutching her chest. The big girl she brought with her hair was messy, and she knelt beside her sobbing. Lan Ling saw Xiao Chun being pushed to the ground. Li Xia was still resisting. Li Xia had learned Kung Fu in motion, and the girls were not her opponents. Ling Chen hurried forward and kicked Li Xia fiercely. Li Xia immediately fell to the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood from the corner of his mouth. Come on, pull down these 2 girls who are disobedient to discipline, and play 40 big boards each. How are you, come, pass on Dr. Zhou. In my arms, very tender. Lan Ling hadn't even walked yet, her feet were pierced by needles. When she heard that Ling Chen wanted to hit her girl with a stick, she was in a hurry and fell to the ground with a slap. Ling Chen did not speak, and no one came to help her. Master, it has already been passed on. A ying voice behind him, Lan Ling knew, that was the first concubine Ling Chen married, Lu Hui. Lan Ling got up and limped over, Your Highness, Qiao-chun and Lixia grew up in the mountains and were ignorant, please forgive them this time. Go down and they'll be dead. Lan Ling already understands that the princess is showing her sovereignty. Today is their big wedding day, and she can't wait to start with her girl. If you dare to disobey the princess, no one will beg for mercy. Lan Ling, there are many people in the palace, and it is the rules to manage so many people. Lan Ling knew that he was building prestige for Guan Yu. Miss, it's not the servant's fault, the servant is already very careful. She deliberately bumped into Li Xia, and she followed Li Xia wherever she went, calling the lady rude. Li Xia couldn't bear it anymore. Qiao Chun defended. Qiao Chun usually doesn't talk much, and she's stable. She must be out of breath when she says this. Shut up. Of course Lan Ling knew that they did it on purpose. Li Xia fainted. Lan Ling knew that Ling Chen had used his skill just now. Lan Ling rushed over. Lixia is sturdy since she was a child, and will not faint easily. She tried her pulse and was terribly hurt. Your Highness, today is your happy day. Seeing the blood is unlucky, I'll punish you another day. Hans He-tao said in a deep voice. He is Ling Chen's friend, the second son of Mrs. Han, who originally came to make trouble for the bridal chamber, but ended up fighting here. Lan Ling glanced at him gratefully. Dr. Zhou gave Guan Yu a pulse test. How is it? Ling Chen asked. The princess qi and blood attacked the heart, causing heart disease. The villain immediately dispensed medicine. Dr. Zhou replied.